Hello, I'm Brian Madden. We have an encore performance, a special visit back with Andy Mele, premier boat builder. Boat building lives. In fact, it thrives in the person of Andy Mele, the owner of Ship Skills, a construction and repair shop on the Rondout in Kingston.
The theme of the shop overall is one of great versatility. Therefore, the name Ship Skills. I wanted something that would convey the fact that we are not afraid of larger vessels and that we have a broad range of capabilities. Therefore, skills. It's a little overambitious to say that we work on ships, but by some people's definitions we do. We've had vessels as big as 105 feet here. Our work ranges from small skiff-sized vessels. We've built 3 shad fishing boats for local shad fishermen, which is a lot of fun. These guys will pay, you know, $1,500 for a flat-bottom boat of my design, which is a great improvement over the sort of thing they're used to going out fishing with. And they'll go out in the Hudson River in April and pay for the boat in 1 or 2 drifts, you know, and then just go on. It's just a terrific thing. I get stories back about my shad fishing boats every year. So-and-so, how many fish he caught this time, and how he caught so many fish he couldn't get back to put his motor on and he had to paddle home, that kind of thing.
Andy says the colder it gets, the better it is for business.
Winter is our busiest time because the boats have all been put away. They're inactive. And what better time to get work done on them than when they're inactive? Nobody wants to have work done on the boat when it's in the water and they could be out using it. Therefore, I invariably try to plan for a death-defying slump every summer when the people have their boats and are trying to squeeze every last bit of use out of them before they put them away and give them into our tender mercies. So we're very busy right now. We have a crew of 10 people going, a couple of which are part-time, but still it's the biggest crew we've had. A number of the people are local. Some walk to work.
Even though Andy says it costs about $180,000 to design and construct a catamaran such as the one he's working on, he says his business is on the upswing.
Boats, of course, are enjoying a huge upsurge in popularity. The drop in the cost of fuel, which affected not only, of course, the powerboat, the logical powerboat business, in that the cost of fuel meant that more people could own boats and drive around in them. It also affected the cost of the resins used for fiberglass production and stuff. So I guess you could say that production boats have been booming lately. But of course that really doesn't carry over into my trade, which would roughly be called custom boat construction. I have, however, been enjoying some fairly good trends of late also. There seems to be more of a willingness for people to go into debt. It's a horrible thing to say, but I've found a greater willingness on the part of my client sector out there to spend money on their boats. There's a resurgence in interest in old wooden craft, so I've been doing a lot of restoration work. I have a customer out there right now who's sailed his boat maybe 50,000 miles since he had it restored here. It's a 50-year-old wooden boat. He's been off to Bermuda, down to the islands. He's headed for Venezuela. His dream is to sail the thing around the world, or at least to Europe next year, before he moves up to a bigger boat.
Some of the techniques used by the shipyard workers in the 1800s still are practiced today.
Many people say that the trades have been lost. They haven't. It's absurd. What's been lost is the ways that these piecework guys, the fellows who'd come to work in their, olive drab, one-color work clothing, uniforms and their hats and everything like that. Lunch boxes would just go to work, punch the time clock, and run a bandsaw all day, churning out deck beams in the manufacture of sub chasers or something like that. That's very often what's referred to as the good old days. Yeah, a lot of those tricks have been lost. How do you stack lumber faster and better in order to be able to churn out more work, more production? We're gradually having to rediscover a lot of the stuff that fell through the cracks as the historians were going around furiously recording the business. But they recorded a lot of it. A lot of the designs, a lot of the processes are saved. A lot of them are just common sense. And frankly, I think we've invented a number of processes that never used to exist before. And of course, new technology, new machines, new design processes and everything have helped us upgrade. Anyhow, again, to digress to historical viewpoints on the craft of ship and boat building, the destiny of that business has been linked to the destiny of waterborne trade on the Hudson River, as far as the Hudson River shipbuilding industry is concerned. These shipyards in the Rondout Creek and up and down the valley were there in direct proportion to the need for them. Of course, we have references to Revolutionary War era vessels coming up to the Rondout to have rigging done in the sheltered and protected waters of the Kingston area. However, I'm certain that the earliest settlers, when they were up here, one of the first things they would do is build a place to build and maintain their boats. If you imagine a world in which there were no roads, just a few little footpaths and muddy wagon roads, you can readily imagine that the river was by far the easiest and fastest way to get any place. And the boats were the lifeline of the entire commerce, the entire culture. All of a sudden, shipyards take on a great importance. Nowadays, we have little mechanical shops all over the place to build and maintain and restore our cars and trucks. It was the same way with shipyards there. So we say 10 shipyards, that seems like a lot, but and I'm sure there were more because I have no records of anything before about 1800. In all likelihood, there were little slipways and railways and things just all over the place. But as waterborne traffic declined, which of course it did with the advent of good roads and good trucks and cheap fuel and the internal combustion engine, so did the need for shipyards, and the shipyards went out just the way the steamboats went out and the schooners and everything like that. So we're capitalizing on a slightly different trend. We're capitalizing on a resurgence in interest in wooden boats. We're capitalizing on a new technology called wood epoxy saturation technique, which I also refer to as wood epoxy composite. That involves soaking or dipping or coating or whatever the wood in epoxy resins before it gets laminated and put together. That process reduces the maintenance time on wood vessels to a schedule similar to that of a fiberglass boat. With that, we can sell wooden boats again and be woodworkers. It's just that we have to have a pot of epoxy resin by our side, whereas before they used to have the table saw and so on and so forth. They used to have to hew giant timbers. Well, we hew giant timbers when we do that type of work too. I know how to use shipwrights adze. I can even do a little demonstration for you. But the wood epoxy boat or West system boat, like the catamaran out here, has provided us with a whole new area of business. We're in discussion now with a man who would like to invest in a business building electric launches, replica type launches, about 25 feet long, but using new high-tech electric motors with solar panels on the canopy overhead that will that will be built and marketed as pieces of fine furniture, literally, with really good woodwork in them. That will go out to people who would be interested in a new and interesting toy, essentially. I don't think we'll ever be able to plug it as anything you can cruise with or anything you can commute to work with or anything like that, but it's clearly going to appeal to people on small rivers and lakes and ponds and bays and sounds and stuff like that. To go out on a nice sunny day, turn off the batteries and just cruise on solar power in total silence, which is another neat thing. A friend of mine has a 38-foot electric launch, an old one with the original power plant, old batteries, all the original instrumentation. And when you just start gliding down the river in that, it's awesome. It's a lot of fun. Has all the best aspects of a motorboat and a sailboat in many ways. It's exciting. So we're talking about maybe 100 boats a year with that thing. So it requires some new thought, and we're working on that. And I find that very exciting. The future of the company will be tied in many ways to that.
Well, let's take a look at some of the other projects going on at the shop.
Outside, I have a catamaran that was modified and lengthened. We have a Hudson Valley Spirit high-end dry captive, and one poor boat. It's under wraps right now, so I guess we don't want to take the time to take it off, which is a before picture. It's a wreck, complete wreck. And we're gradually bringing it back to life as the owner, infuses us with a little bit of cash. We do a little more work. It's an old boat, sailboat, that we're going to sheathe with wood epoxy, 2 or 3 layers of wood veneers instead of fiberglass, which is not very compatible with wood. We're going to sheathe it with wood and then, saturate the exterior of that with epoxy and turn it into a leak-free boat, this 60-year-old, basket case. Yeah.
Also in for repairs is West Point's excursion boat, the Commander.
2 years ago, we did her upper deck. Somebody was up there with spike heels and went right, the heel went through the deck, and that was embarrassing. They are very responsible people. I mean, they like to stretch the thing as long as possible to get, to avoid having to spend the money. Anybody would. That's human nature. But when there is a need for work, they do it, and they go right to the end. So they had the entire upper deck replaced, the deck beams and all. And we did that. And last year they went up for their Coast Guard inspection. They have a schedule. In alternate years, they do elective surgery, sort of. And in the intervening years, the Coast Guard comes up and goes over the boat and tells them what they have to have done. So they schedule that as needed. This year, the main deck was clearly the candidate. So we tore it all off and had to rig up a wire truss system to keep the boat in its shape, because the main deck is a major part of the boat's structure. And so we did that, and a number of the deck beams needed replacing, which we anticipated, and those are going in now. The big surprise, there's always a big surprise, was that a lot of the blocking around the stern of the boat was rotted too. So we're replacing that.
Andy says he's built and reconstructed about 70 boats at his shop, a process which can take from 3 to 6 months. And he says it all starts with a need.
We go over the needs, and we filter out what's real and what isn't, what'll work, what won't, what they can afford, what they can't, and come up with, just sitting at a desk with scratch paper, we can rough out the whole project. Then, if it is indeed new construction, we discuss the design. Is there a design that already exists? I never, perhaps I should, but I never really try to sell my design work. I try to sell an affordable project first and foremost. Sometimes the owner will want an existing design, in which case we contact the designer, pay him his royalty, get the design, and bang, we're off and running. If they want me to design it, I do that, of course. I'm happy. I love it. I probably love it more than about any other aspect of the business. It's certainly the purest form of creativity in the marine trades. So then I draw the boat, and drawing the boat is a many-headed beast. You have to maintain 4 or 5 different lines of thought and keep correlating them as you go along so that one doesn't deviate too far from the other. The weight of the boat, the trim of the boat, the shape of the boat, the hydrodynamics, the rig, the center of effort of the sail plan, you name it. There's a million things that have to be kept in line. And of course the cost has to be kept in line in consideration, the projected cost of the thing as you're doing it. Okay, so you get the design done. You come up with the table of materials, all that stuff, and you get to work on the boat. First thing to do is to draw the design full size. It's called lofting. You're drawing things to an inch, inch and a half to a foot scale, a slip of the pen, or just a little wobble at that scale will result in errors of as great as a half an inch out on the shop floor, or an inch, you know. So you draw the boat full size, and in some ways you actually redesign it in that lofting process. And there's really no substitute for it. I have actually been called upon to correct computer lofting on 2 occasions. The new high-tech, you know, numbers crunchers have, you know, the computer lofting stuff is only as good as the information that goes into it, and there's so many variables that they can't get everything in. So the time-honored way is really the best, and more often than not. From that lofting process, we develop a set of patterns and molds and forms and stuff. Those get put up, and then the boat gets built on top of them. In the case of a multi-hull, like this cruising catamaran, we built the hulls first. Catamaran is nice because you build 1 hull mold, and you get 2 hulls off it, economy. A trimaran is a bore because you have to build 2. The main hull is usually different than the outrigger hulls. Then you build the cross beams, and then you build the structure on top of them, and then you build whatever's in the hull, and then you rig it and launch it. A monohull, traditionally or a traditional type of monohull, would involve steam bending of lumber to bend the frames over the form, laboriously chopping out and assembling and bolting the sections of the keel, getting everything together, then planking it, then caulking it, inverting it right side up. We try to build upside down as much as possible just because it's more cost effective and a hell of a lot easier to work downhand like this than it is to work on the bottom of a boat, which is up above you. And the thing gets, you know, painted, launched, and hopefully sailed away by a satisfied customer.
As we can see, designing plays a very big part in putting a boat together.
Part of the magic of coming up with a successful design is in how you predict where the thing is going to float. This is called a planimeter, and it measures irregular areas, and it's the secret weapon of the boat designer. By tracing the point, setting this to 0, tracing with the pointer the outline of a given station, which is like a slice of the boat at any given point. Like this, back to where we started, taking the number and running it through a formula. We do that with all the stations and then come up with how much underwater volume the boat has, how much it's going to displace, of course, how much it's going to weigh we can get from that, because the amount of water it displaces and what it weighs are equal, logically. We come up with where it's going to float. We get all our various ratios, our prismatic coefficients, and our centers of lateral area, and so on and so forth. All that stuff comes from this strange-looking gadget. These are the lines of the boat here. They're the shape of the hull. In this plan here, which is called the body plan, we're looking at slices cut this way, chop through a hull at any given point. Okay. This plan here is the profile, and it relatively logically is the thing looked at from the side. And then we have the plan view, which is looking at it from the top, using the water line now as a center line, and we have the deck line, water line, and so on and so forth. And those are slices made through the boat this way, parallel with the water. And those 3 views in the design process have to be very carefully reconciled, line at a time, in this way of looking at it, a line at a time from the body plan, line at a time from the profile, and gradually all these things just sort of get together until they're all correct. So a set of coordinates from this plan matches up with a set of coordinates from that plan, which match up with a set of coordinates from that plan, and everything's jake. This plan, this model, which is not a thing of great beauty, is of the 38-foot catamaran. It's made of cardboard, but it is to scale. And what it did was help me to understand, help me to wrap my mind around the various angles and intersections of all the elements of the boat, and even by peeking inside to get an idea of the spatial areas. There's 2 hours work and with the glue gun and a little bit of cardboard gave me information about the construction of the thing, the aesthetics of it, the proportions of it, and so on and so forth. It's just a fabulous exercise in simplicity. This is really the showpiece here, this drawing. This is the one that has the most detail. It's the one that you use for your study plan portfolio that you send to clients who are interested in just seeing your designs. It usually has the basic statistics on the boat here. Her load water line, which is 34 feet long. Her beam overall is 21 feet. The, draft, 3 feet, and so on and so forth. The weight of the boat, which is only 9,000 pounds for a 38-foot boat. And the sail area, and so on and so forth. This is the one that will help the owner to best visualize the boat. Many owners look at the lines and they just, they can understand them, but they just don't give you the picture, the feel, what a friend of mine refers to as that warm feeling. And now for what we'll see downstairs. This is a construction section of one of the bulkheads. Bulkheads are the major athwartship structural members. This one here we're looking at is this bulkhead, the aftermost end of the main cabin, which reaches all the way through the boat, right from the keel of each hull all the way up. It's built of 1/4-inch plywood, sandwiching Douglas fir timbers, which are 3/4 by 1 3/4 inches. They're not really timbers. We refer to it as timber to differentiate it from plywood. And in these void spaces here, we use a honeycomb, resin-impregnated paper honeycomb called Verticel. And the resulting sandwich construction is extremely stiff and much stronger than the sum of its parts only.
Growing up in Woodstock and learning the skills of boat building at a young age, Andy's always been fascinated with the river. He says over the years it's changed dramatically for the better.
I can see boats going by in the Rondout Creek and see their propellers churning underwater and see their rudders. I can see the keels of sailboats sometimes. You have no idea what that means. I mean, the Hudson River by its nature is a turbid body. In other words, the water's full of sediment. It's not pollution, it's not fecal matter, it's just sediment from, runoff from streams and stuff. So it's never going to be crystal clear. But when I first started sailing on the river about 15 years ago, I owned a little 20-foot sloop that I bought and put together with a friend of mine, and we just sailed that boat everywhere. There were maybe 10 sailboats in this area, no more than that. Between here and Saugerties, nobody was sailing. There were a few people. There were a lot of power boats, but that was the vast majority of the boating, the yachting population. There were no excursion boats then, and the water was so polluted you really didn't want to swim in it. I did, from time to time, but it was, you always sort of went home and took a shower afterward. Nowadays you don't have to do that. You can go out in the river and it's, the water is classified in 3 different classifications, A, B, and C, and this is an A area. And when the New York City was trying to think of a place to tap for drinking water, they were thinking of here in this area. So it's pretty good. There's areas where you still want to avoid, but in any event, there's a story I want to tell. After we built the Woody Guthrie for Pete Seeger, which would have been 9 years ago now, I guess, the fellow who was the first captain of the Clearwater, which would have been 15 or 16 years ago, was aboard, and we were sailing, just drifting along with almost no breeze, way down south, probably in the general area of Peekskill, I guess. And it was just blazing hot. Very little wind. We were just baking. We were like lying on with our tongues hanging out. And Alan was back at the helm, and I said, "Oh man, I can't stand it anymore." And I went and got a bucket, without thinking, of course, just because I was, the river was getting cleaner. Dipped it in the river and dumped it over my head. I proceeded to do this, and as I noticed, I noticed that Alan Onapu was back on the tiller looking at me in sheer horror. Of course, he'd been gone since the first year of Clearwater's operation, when the river was just a running cesspool. And he wasn't really in touch with how much progress had been made in that time. And I said, "What's the matter?" And I said, why don't you, here, come on, cool yourself off. He just couldn't believe it. And after a few minutes, it finally sank in on him, and he stripped off all his clothes, jumped over the side, and was just frolicking in the water like a porpoise. And it was such a pleasure for me to see that.
As for the future of this business, Andy is very optimistic.
My feeling is that with a little bit of foresight, I should be knocking on wood while I'm saying this, foresight is hard to come by. I think it's good. I think it's solid. I think it's more solid than production type construction. Our custom business can adapt to virtually any change. The only change we can't adapt to, of course, is one that has just strapped everybody so bad that nobody can afford to have luxury items anymore. But even so, half of our business, more than half of our business, is with commercial customers. So the business of versatility, the ship skills, which even goes beyond boats and into what I call specialty fabrication, a term I borrowed from a friend of mine because it was so perfect to describe a lot of the things we do. I think survivability is a very big part of the business. I think we're pretty okay. I do, however, see an upswing in interest in commercial and custom watercraft. And with the sort of marketing we're doing and the sort of outreach we're doing and the sort of reputation we're building, which has just been excellent. The backup we do, we have an informal sort of guarantee on our work, and if anything is clearly our fault, I don't even have to put it in writing, I just back it up, we go down and fix it. All those things add up to what I regard as a very strong future.
For some things, the old-fashioned way still holds. Not to knock those factory boats out there, but there's something spiritual about it when you do it yourself, just like Andy Mele does. Thanks for coming aboard this time. We'll be back next week right here on the river.